Wow, so welcome. Welcome to Tara Institute. My name is Alice, and I wish you all a very happy new year. I hope you had a peaceful and happy Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, and a happy break in whichever way you celebrate. I had a very, very quiet Christmas because my husband was in India at the Dalai Lama's teachings, and my son was in India on the beach, but we had been at Kopan Monastery together doing a meditation course in November, December, and my daughter was down the beach with her in-laws, so it was me and the dog, but it was very, very pleasant. A very warm welcome to those of you who are new, and can you just put up your hand if you're new tonight? So there are quite a few of you. That's wonderful. So welcome. This session will run for about an hour, so we'll do some breathing meditation which will be guided. There'll be a bit of a talk on the topic, and then another short meditation at the end, and then there'll be time for questions if you want to ask questions, and then after that you're most welcome to stay for a cup of tea in the diner, some tea and cake. Since we are all here in the meditation hall at Tara Institute in January 2019, from the Buddhist point of view, we already have a very meaningful connection because we're here together. So you might like to turn to the people around you just briefly and wish them a happy new year, just to kind of... Okay. Very good. Now, no one is a stranger, so at tea time we can chat very nicely together, not leave anyone out. That will be great. I just might mention that in January the program's a bit different. Geshe Doga will resume teaching in February. So this week I'll be leading, this week and next week, I'll be leading Monday nights, which is an intro to Buddhist meditation. And then Wednesday, we're having Tara meditation for the next 2 weeks, which is meditating on this aspect of Green Tara, who is a female Buddha. And it's very beautiful meditation. You don't have to have had the initiation to come to that. And then the next 3 weeks, Jeremy Cohen will be doing Mondays and Wednesdays, and he's going to be leading Chen Rezig meditation on the Wednesday. And this is Chen Rezig over here, the white Buddha, who is the Buddha of compassion. Also a very beautiful practice. So if you've, even if you're sort of vaguely interested to experience what that's like, you're most welcome, and you can just watch and listen. So I think reflecting on the year ahead and establishing some constructive intentions is a really wonderful way to begin the year. And even that, so many people have come here tonight, I'm really surprised, shows that we have an intention already to work with our minds and make our lives more meaningful. And this is really the best way. I know His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Geshe Doga, our teacher here, would be so pleased that so many people, really want to start the year well. And cultivating a conscious, clear and positive motivation is of paramount importance in the Buddhist teachings, because behind everything that we do behind every action that we do and behind everything that we say, first there is the thought. Though often we're not even aware of it because we do things so quickly. Yes, recently I was in Kathmandu with my son, attending a month-long meditation course, which was wonderful. And I could only do 2 weeks because I'm a celebrant. Well, I'm doing 2 more weddings, then I'm retiring, but I needed to come back to do a wedding, so I did 2 weeks, but it was fabulous. And it was quite strict. So Kopan Monastery in just out of Kathmandu is like the mothership for all the worldwide centres. This is where the centres started. And it was started by Lama Thubten Yeshe, who's in the photo on the right, in the left-hand cabinet. So it's quite strict at this course. You know, it's up early. The first session starts at 5:30, which is a prostration session. I was a little bit lazy, but I would go to the meditations at 6:30, and my room was right at the bottom of the Kopan hill. It's quite a big hill, so I had to climb 100 very steep steps to get to the meditation hall. So I was well awake by the time I got there and somewhat out of breath, unable to speak, although we weren't allowed to speak anyway. So before we meditated, the first thing that would happen is that we had to establish a very clear intention for the day, and it kind of set the feeling tone for the day. And this meant beginning the day with clarity and an attitude of compassion, of concern for others. And this then happened before each session. So each of the different sessions during the day, we would establish our motivation again. And it was a fantastic reminder to wake up and be aware of what we were doing and why we were doing it. You know, it's so rare to have this time where we can really be, you know, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness, isn't there? You know, mindfulness is kind of a bit the in thing. And it means just being awake to what we're doing. So I think for me anyway, you know, if we're talking about motivation and what we're doing, I mostly do stuff, if I'm honest, for my own benefit, with the underlying thoughts, I want what I want now, or I don't want that, how can I make it go away? So the mind kind of shifts between these two a lot. In the Foundation of Buddhist Practice, which is a really marvellous book written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Thubten Chodron, who's an American nun in this tradition, His Holiness points out that at the moment our idea of success is that all external events unfold according to our wishes. So this means we get our own way, doesn't it? And that all people behave in accordance with our ideas. Good luck with that. So we're happy when our desires and needs are fulfilled, and then when we encounter adversity, we crumble and revert to old habits like complaining, sulking, or attacking those who interfere with, you know, what we want with our desires. I don't know, what do you think? You know, true or not true? You know, this is the nature of the investigation that we need to do. Anyway, the Buddha advised that before any kind of spiritual inquiry like this, it's very helpful to relax, to settle and focus the mind with some breathing meditation. So the aim with breathing meditation is to put aside all of the mental commentary on this and that, on good and bad, and focus our minds merely on the coming and going of the breath. And this mindfulness of breathing meditation provides the ideal conditions for studying. Actually, it provides ideal conditions for doing anything, because it helps to bring the mind to a more peaceful, clear, stable and balanced state. it allows us to sit still long enough to see what's actually happening in our minds without getting caught up in it. So we observe, we just notice the thoughts and feelings that arise and dissolve. So let's do some breathing meditation together now. I hope everybody is comfortable, and if you need an extra cushion, certainly do get one. So just try and be as comfortable as possible. And we sit in a posture that allows us to be alert and relaxed so that we can be really fully present in the moment. Being in pain is not helpful. So sitting with a straight back and even shoulders. And you can close your eyes or leave them just a little bit open, letting a little bit of light through your lashes. And now let's cultivate a clear and positive intention for doing this meditation. So it might be to cultivate greater peace or to heal. So try and be very clear about what it is at this moment that you're hoping to achieve through meditation. And it all really comes under the umbrella of achieving greater happiness and lessening suffering. And we can extend our motivation to include others. This is quite important. So that whatever benefits we gain by meditating, we'll be able to share that, to help others as much as possible, maybe by being more patient, being kinder, more understanding. And we bring our awareness into our bodies and just feel how we are right now on this Monday night in January 2019. Aware of the touch of our bodies on the cushion or on the chair, the feeling of our hands in our laps, the clothes against our skin, just being aware if we're warm or cool. And as much as we can, we intentionally relax where there is holding on to tension, paying attention to the shoulders, the back of the neck, aware of the face, and allow it to relax so the forehead becomes smooth and all the muscles around the eyes and jaw relax and release. And we're breathing. The body knows how to breathe. And right now we take 3 deeper breaths to deepen the feeling of relaxation. So breathing in through the nostrils right down to the belly, allowing the belly to expand. Breathing up through the diaphragm and into the chest. And then releasing completely. And we do this 3 times. And we might notice that we're aware of sound. The sound of the air conditioner, maybe people moving a bit. So we just notice the sounds without thinking about them, and we bring our attention to the feeling of the breath entering the body and leaving the body. Feeling the breath, not thinking about the breath. And we can focus on the feeling of the breath at the nostrils or on the rise and fall of the abdomen, wherever those sensations are most vivid for you. Breathing in, just noticing and knowing that we're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing that we're breathing out. And we let everything else going on in our minds or in the room recede until it disappears. We're not suppressing anything, we're just featuring the breath clearly in the field of awareness. Breathing in and breathing out with clear awareness. You might notice that when you breathe in, the air is cool. When you breathe out, the air has become warmed by your body. So we're really focusing here on how our breath appears to our minds. And we keep focusing on the breath coming in and the breath going out. And you might have noticed that the mind has a life of its own and starts commenting on your experience, that this is boring, or the mind could just have drifted off into thinking about what you have to do tomorrow, or about a conversation you had today, or what you saw in the shops. Whatever it is, you've lost touch with your breath. And this is just the way the mind is. It's normal, it's what minds do. And it's not that we'll never be able to meditate because the mind is unruly. It's like the ocean. Waves rise because of the wind. But even when it's at its wildest, if you drop down deeper, there's just a gentle calm and stillness. And it's the same with the mind. Awareness itself is like the depths, quiet and still. So we bring the attention back to the breath over and over again, without judging, without frustration, just with awareness. Breathing in, breathing out. If the mind wanders 100 times, we bring it back 100 times. It's awareness that knows the mind has wandered in the first place. So any time you notice that your mind is no longer on the breath, you let your awareness take note of what's on your mind, no problem. And in this moment, the body's still breathing, and we reconnect with the breath coming and going. We just come back to this moment, this breath. Each in-breath, a new beginning. Each out-breath, a complete letting go. And now I invite you to relax your meditation, to open your eyes and maintain the same quality of awareness and just take note of how you feel. Okay, so you might need to have a stretch. Rub your feet if you've got pins and needles. Shift your posture. So what we can see with this breathing meditation is our capacity to be mindful, our ability to see what's going on in the mind without getting caught up in the experience. And we practice merely noticing when a thought or a feeling comes up, neither rejecting it nor getting involved or stuck in it, just noticing it, then bringing the mind back to the breath. And this is called, in this tradition, it's called the mental factor of introspection. So mindfulness, according to our teacher, is the mental factor that keeps the mind focused on the object, which is the breath. And then introspection is a small part of the mind that's just checking up all the time, checking to see if the mind has floated away or if you've fallen asleep. They're the two main types of mind that disturb us, sort of excessive thinking, or it's called mental sinking, where you kind of get a bit drowsy and warm and can be quite pleasant, and you can think, oh, you know, I'm really meditating, but actually it's closer to sleep than to meditation, because meditation should be very bright. So looking in this way, looking at thoughts this way, loosens the tendency to get stuck in negative, unhelpful and troubling thoughts, and to see them more realistically and to challenge them whether they're true or not, and whether they're helpful or unhelpful. And the way it works for me is if I notice myself ruminating about some old scenario, where my friend has made me unhappy, and I've noticed that this often happens when I'm weeding, where I've got a big garden, so I have to do a lot of weeding. And this is when that mental blah, blah, blah ramps up. And so, it might be this friend from the past who didn't invite me to a party, or my husband has forgotten our anniversary, or, the nonsense that comes up in the mind. But being able to catch it rather than, following the storyline for an hour and a half, catching, and I say, Alice, be very, very careful. Because thinking like this is not helpful, and it's only going to lead to unhappiness. And this is actually something that Geshe Doga, our teacher, who sits on the teaching throne, our resident Lama, it's something that he said some years ago that really kind of clicked in my mind. I thought, wow, that's great. And then he's repeated it. So it's, yes, Alice, be very, very careful, which usually makes me giggle, and it kind of breaks that thought pattern. So it's like pressing the pause button on a bad movie and deciding to turn it off. Life with Netflix, isn't it, really? And then, but the thing is that, you can stop that ruminating, but you've still got to understand why these habits keep coming up, why we think like this. So then later, maybe when I'm in bed, comfortable and reviewing my day, I'll do some analytical meditation where I look clearly at that habit of dredging up old grudges and remember, about that particular situation. It all happened a very long time ago, and thinking about it doesn't change anything at all. And Geshe-la's talked about this too. You can be kind of going rah, 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 about a person and what they've done and what they did and what you said and what they said and what I should have done, blah, you know how it goes, whilst they're sitting on a beach in Bali having a lovely time. So, it's completely waste of time, useless. And what it does do, though, is to, if we buy into these storylines, is to perpetuate the habit of chewing on old bones. And then, so thinking about how, it's completely not useless. And then after that thinking, well, my friend, this person, is a human being just like me, same, who wants happiness and doesn't want to suffer. And nobody is perfect. Everyone has made mistakes. I have made a lot of mistakes. So may they be happy. May they be happy. Because logically, if you think about it, if a person who, maybe one of our difficult treasures, who teaches us patience, maybe if they were really happy, then they wouldn't be so difficult, So wishing them happiness is skillful. And then let it go, then go to sleep. And each time we challenge the negative thinking, it reduces the tendency to do it. And the Buddhist parlance is we say it purifies that activity. And we know by thinking differently in a systematic way, it actually changes our brains and builds healthier neural pathways. But the process needs to be quite intentional. So just saying or just thinking, oh, let it go. People say that, oh, you've got to let it go. Well, and hoping for the best, it doesn't work. So we actually need a method or process for actually changing that habit, for challenging it. So thinking about New Year's resolutions, which is after all about changing habits, they are usually about external physical concerns like quitting smoking, reducing alcohol intake, eating healthier food, getting more exercise, losing weight, and so on. Have I done all of these resolutions? Yes, I have. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with these aspirations because they are about making positive change. But I think if we look more closely without judging good or bad, we can see that they are mostly about me, me, me. My happiness, my body, my health, my image. So the intentions are okay, but somewhat limited in their potential for creating happiness. So from the Buddha's point of view, the types of motivation that lead to greater happiness and fulfillment are other-centered rather than self-centered, or at least are more inclusive of the welfare of beings. And in the Buddhist context, when we talk about happiness, we're not talking about fleeting pleasures that arise from pleasant stimuli like eating ice cream, having sex, shopping, and so on. But rather, according to Alan Wallace, who is a really wonderful meditation teacher, he calls it a state of genuine well-being that flows from an awareness that is pure and unobscured. And this is actually a Buddhist description of the mind. So it's clear and unobscured. So happiness in this context isn't simply a pleasant feeling that comes and goes. And the thing is, with all external stimuli, they come and go. They'll bring you happiness for some time, but the happiness doesn't last or it changes. Lama Yeshe, who established this centre, one of his favourite analogies was chocolate cake. You know, he thought Western people just really loved chocolate cake. And from the Buddhist point of view, actually chocolate cake is an example of the second type of the three sufferings, the suffering of change. And so it's said that the first taste of chocolate cake is actually the beginning of the suffering of too much chocolate cake. So if you think about it, if happiness resided in the cake, in the object, then the more you ate, if the happiness was in it, the more you ate, the happier you would get. So clearly that's not the case, and it's the same with any external stimuli. So rather, happiness is a state of well-being that underlies all of our emotional states and embraces all the million joys and the million sorrows that come our way. So it's really about being okay with whatever is going on and finding meaning during all the ups and downs of life. So for me, becoming a grandmother has made it much easier to change some of my unhealthier habits, because there's a little person who needs me to be as strong and fit as I can in order to be of help. And he's 2.5 now and he's getting really heavy. Anyway, Geshe Doga, our resident Tibetan Lama, often talks about the importance of establishing a beneficial motivation at the beginning of each day. So not just, making a resolution at the beginning of the year, but at the beginning of every day, and actually before every activity is best. And he's often said the most practical approach appropriate at our level is to develop the following attitude on a daily basis. I will not harm any being in the slightest manner, and I will benefit living beings in the best possible way. So just have a think about that. I will not harm any being in the slightest manner, and I will benefit living beings in the best possible way. And if you think about it, this motivation covers every possible New Year's resolution, because each one of us is included in all living beings. You have to include yourself. And it can be applied to every possible action. So I will not harm any being covers quitting smoking, cutting down on alcohol, eating in a healthy and ethical way, you know, refraining from putting people down and being judgmental. And benefiting others covers all of that too, but also looking after the environment, being more encouraging and supportive. So broadening the scope of our motivation is actually very efficient. And again, we need to check according to our experience if this is true or not. So I've photocopied and cut out that little saying, I'm not going to harm any being in the slightest manner, and I'll benefit living beings in the best possible way. And I've put 3 piles over there, so if you feel like taking it just as an experiment, so you put it next to your bed, and when you wake up, instead of going straight into coffee, my first meeting, la 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 la, you just for a moment take some breath and think about it. Just think about it. So I invite you to do that. I'm not sure if I made enough because I didn't think as many people will come, but I can do more. Anyway, Lama Yeshe, who founded this centre more than 40 years ago, said, when you study Buddhism, you are studying yourself. The nature of your body, of your speech and your mind, with the emphasis being on the nature of your mind and how it works in everyday life. And in order to give a framework for thinking about this, the Buddha talked about 10 destructive actions to refrain from, so things not to do, and their opposites, 10 constructive actions to be adopted. And these form the basis of living an ethical life. So I haven't printed them out, but I do invite you to Google them, because I know it's very easy to forget. From the Buddha's point of view, these actions also create the karma that we will experience in future lives. But even looking at them in terms of this one life is very helpful for living a more peaceful life. And a few years ago I remember mentioning these 10 in a talk about Buddhist ethics, and a young man put his hand up to say that he'd left the Catholic tradition because of all the do's and don'ts. And now he'd come to investigate Buddhism to find that it's pretty much the same deal. And it is. This was something that became really obvious actually at the course at Copan. There were 260 people and quite a few who were new to Buddhism. And Buddhism seems to have quite a good reputation in terms of the major religions. And people come to it, I think, with a little bit expectation of it's going to be light and love and peace, and and it's not like that. I mean, certainly the Buddha has demonstrated a way to get there, but the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, if they could have, they would have made us completely happy by now. But all they can do is show the way. So the thing is that living an ethical life is the foundation, the basis for all Buddhist practice. And I'm pretty sure the foundation for every valid spiritual tradition. And not because Jesus or the Buddha or your mother said so, but because the mind needs to be peaceful and stable to meditate well and progress on the path. And it's pretty difficult to have a peaceful mind if we're gossiping or hurting others or lying or being obsessed with possessions or fighting with our loved ones and so on. Isn't it? The mind doesn't stay peaceful. And it's this very stuff, the thinking about this stuff, that comes up to disturb our meditation for the most part. So we can be focused very peacefully on the coming and going of the breath, and suddenly that thought comes up about an old grievance with a family member, and all of a sudden the movie's playing. She said this, I should have said this, and they shouldn't have done that, and I wish I'd done that, and then revenge comes up in the mind, and blah 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 blah. Or a thought of the rug that I saw online that would look so great in the family room. This is, like this. And maybe after this session I could go home and buy it, and then it could be delivered by the weekend, and then when I'm having people over it's going to look really great, and blah, 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 blah. And your meditation finished, complete. And I can remember being at Kopan Monastery 40 years ago, or 39 years ago, completely new to meditation and so on, and I sat for a month rebuilding my wardrobe, building a house, hopeless. Can't say I'm a lot better, but... And again, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with, the things about which we're thinking, but that they keep us spinning on this merry-go-round of desire and aversion. The mind goes up and down and up and down, as Geshe-la says, like Melbourne's weather. And it's this that keeps us in a state of dissatisfaction and anxiety. And our minds are, what is it? Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. We tend to, all the nice things that happen in our life, we tend to let that slide off a bit, and then all the difficult bits we kind of clutch. So the Buddha taught this systematic way of thinking about our actions by explaining the 10 destructive actions and their opposites. And it's a way of remembering it, and it's really good to remember this stuff, because then you can never be bored. You're sitting in or standing at the queue at Safeway, or no, who has the longest queue? What's that strange one? Aldi. Have really strong, long queues. So if you, remember this stuff, then you can stand and make really good use of time. So it's like a 500 hand. There are 3 of body, there are 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. That's how you deal a 500 hand, isn't it? Yeah? No one here plays 500, oops. Anyway, the first 3, it's pretty obvious. Killing, stealing, and unwise or unkind sexual conduct. They're the 3 of body. The 4 of speech is lying, divisive speech or slander. That's, splitting people up with your speech. Harsh words, and idle gossip, which includes reading trashy magazines. And then the 3 of mind, which are covetousness. It's not only wanting other people's stuff, it's just wanting stuff too much. And it was pointed out during the course that actually, wanting stuff in shops, it's still other people's stuff, isn't it? That hadn't occurred to me before, but it's still, at that point, other people's stuff. So, wanting too much stuff. The second one is malice or harmful intention, so having the wish to hurt people or beings. And then the last one is wrong views. And their opposites, which are preserving life, being generous, having respect for others, speaking the truth, uniting people with your speech, using kind and gentle speech, and not buying into gossip. I think that's a really good one to work on, not buying into gossip, or kind of challenging it, when people start chipping away about some person or another. And, you can challenge it by saying, oh, that's really not my experience of that person. I find them to be very helpful. That stops. That usually cuts it. Then cultivating contentment with what we have, wishing only to benefit beings, and accepting that our actions have consequences is the one that's opposite to wrong views. In Buddhism it has a slightly more specific meaning, and that's having belief in cause and effect and so on. So in the Tibetan tradition we are encouraged to learn these lists and then think about them during the day in relation to our actions, not other people's actions, because isn't it easier to see other people's faults rather than our own? So much easier. And actually this Tibetan tradition of learning lists and learning texts, it's unbelievable, because when when the Chinese Communist Army invaded Tibet and ransacked Tibet, and many people had to escape, people like Geshe Doga had memorized whole books of the teachings, and so even though the texts were destroyed, the texts were remembered completely in the minds of our teachers. So it's a good thing. It's also very good memorizing things. It's, I think, very good for keeping Alzheimer's at bay. Really learning poetry, learning how to do stuff. Yes, so the 4 actions of speech are important because that's how we communicate with others for the most part. So we might take just one to look at in terms of our own lives. You can take one to think about during the day. This is Buddhist practice. This is what it's about. And not judgmentally, not bashing ourselves up and being aggressive, but gently and kindly watching any tendency, say, to gossip about others. So the purpose is to first notice that we're doing it and then begin to kind of reduce that habit. And Joseph Goldstein, I don't know if any of you have come across him, he's a really marvelous American meditation teacher. And he once, I think this was when he was ordained, he was a monk, he once decided to refrain from saying anything at all, good or bad, about another person for 3 months. And he found that about 90% of his speech was eradicated, and his mind became much more peaceful and less judgmental of himself. So that's a very interesting outcome. So we're going to look more at this next week, and I thought we might end this session by doing a little analytical meditation on cultivating a positive attitude for the coming year. Okay, so just sit comfortably again. And bringing the mind back to the breath, just for a moment. And thinking about Geshe Doga's motivation. I will not harm any being in the slightest manner, and I will benefit living beings in the best possible way. So think about this in relation to your own life. Is there an area in your life where you can see that there's work to be done? So just relax with the question for a few moments and see what arises. Is there an area in my relationships, in the way I am in the world, at my work, where we might develop some more positive qualities and diminish some old habits that aren't helpful? Maybe to be more patient, less judgmental, so we try to establish a strong intention to be aware of this during the week, and to have a strong intention to really benefit others in as many ways as we can. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be as easy as making a cup of tea, helping a colleague, and the intention to refrain from harm. And we can think, here we are at the beginning of a new year. We have a precious human life and everything that we need externally to enjoy this life and to make it meaningful. According to the Buddha, we've limitless potential to develop the qualities that lead to happiness for ourselves and others. And we've met with a valid method, the teachings of the Buddha and qualified teachers like Geshe Doga and the Dalai Lama to help us achieve this. And it's very, very rare to be in this position with freedom of thought, freedom of action. We can really feel happy about this. And now we try to establish the intention to, over the next week, be mindful, be aware and awake, and as much as possible be kind to, or at least patient with, every being who crosses our path. Not only those who are close to us, but those we don't know, and even those who challenge our equilibrium. Every being wants happiness. And with this thought, we dedicate the very positive potentials that have arisen tonight from making the effort to come here. Wonderful. Meditating as best we can, and having the courage to look at our minds. So may all of this be the cause for all beings to be happy, and may it be the cause to become awakened. Okay, so you can relax your mind. So does anyone have a question? Yes. So a little bit louder. Yes. Equanimity, yes. Okay, so I think the question is in regards to equanimity. How do we think about the teacher sitting in a throne compared to other human beings, for example? Oh, that's an interesting question. So first of all, I would say that in regards to equanimity, we use that word in a slightly different context, so in the teachings. So equanimity is a mind that perceives all beings as equal, definitely, but we think about usually people in three ways. So their enemy, their friend or we don't know them, strange. So equanimity is about kind of making that more even and recognizing that every being just like me wants happiness and doesn't want happiness, doesn't want suffering. So yes, but I'm sure that it's the same in every one of the world traditions as well. It would be similar. The reason we have a teaching throne, and I think like in Christianity the teacher teaches from a pulpit, from somewhere higher. So it's showing, it's not putting the teacher above any other human being at all, but it's showing respect for the teachings themselves. So when Geshe Doga comes in here, before he sits on the teaching throne, he makes 3 prostrations to the throne to show his respect to the teachings. So this is why the teacher sits higher, sits on the throne, because they represent the teachings of the Buddha, not that they think they're any better than anybody else. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I know the importance of the teachings of the Buddha. It is just how they see and act with that way. To somebody that have no recollection of Buddhism or not, they just can't handle it.
How would another person view it?
How the Buddhist,
Oh, how the monk,
one that sees it, yes.
how he would see
To
it.
see somebody that wants to share, the way he teaches it, yes, at that level.
Yes, well, I would have to say I don't know how my teachers would, because the way they perceive things is so different from the way I perceive things, So I can't say, but yes, 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 yes. Okay, so I think there are parallels, because His Holiness the Dalai Lama was born into a very poor peasant family, so in a way it was kind of similar. And His Holiness always says, because people say he's the living God, he's reincarnation of, or emanation of Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, and His Holiness always says, I'm a simple Buddhist monk. He never, puts himself above anybody else, ever. Yeah, but I can't say how he would view things. Yeah.
I was just reflecting on your talk about gossip and the intention to be kind, to speak kindly of others, and reflecting on times when perhaps I don't live up to those standards even when I set the intention, and what's going wrong, what's happening that doesn't happen. And I was thinking what's a way to address that, and what happens I think is haste. And if you actually slow down and take some time to reflect and to think about things, we don't jump down the rabbit hole of accusation, getting involved in negativity. And often the best thing to do is to pause, or to say, I'll get back to you, or to reflect, and more slowness in life, which is the opposite to what the world is telling us to do.
Yes, that's a really good point, that one way to work with something like gossip is that we need to really slow down and listen. The art of listening is a bit of a forgotten art. And again, it comes back to setting intention, doesn't it? that if even before meeting with a group of friends, if you can set that intention today, I'm not going to buy into gossip and I'm going to listen. Yes. And the thing is, and that's a great point too, refraining from, if you notice that the 10 harmful actions to be refrained from, or the 10 non-virtuous actions to be refrained from. So the act of not doing it is the virtue, is actually the positive karmic seed that's collected. Is it?
On emotional intelligence, and he's now in the book of Dalai Lama.
And what's it called? Okay, so a book by Daniel Goleman and the Dalai Lama. So Daniel Goleman's the positive psychology.
He wrote the last 7 work probably for a decade called Emotional Intelligence.
Right, yeah. Emotional Intelligence, that book, yeah. Very good, thank you. Yeah, it's a good reminder, a really good reminder.
It's amazing how those teachings are very much reflected
Yeah.
in this modern scientific method.
That's it, and I think it's changing that workplace psychology. It's being used much more. Yep.
I just wanted to say, I was to connect to the things on that card that you mentioned, I think I'd have to be a vegetarian.
Well,
Because I'm harming animals,
well, that's a whole other kind of argument, but I'm not going to avoid it, which I would prefer to do. But so, first of all, we're human beings, and we're all works in progress. So, if giving up, yes, becoming ideally vegan would be best, according to the teachings. But the Buddha never, it wasn't his teachings not to eat meat. They weren't his teachings. But if we eat meat, we do support an industry that creates incredible suffering. So I think we do what we can. You know, we absolutely do our best. And if we can't give up, say, eating meat, then you can make sure that you don't eat it as often, and that you source it from an ethically produced supplier. You know, that you can be mindful about how we're interacting with the world. But the same with veggies, the same with everything we eat. I think we need to be much more mindful. Packaging, you know. This is why I think this motivation, I'm not going to harm any being in the slightest manner, and I'll benefit living beings in the best possible way. This is a big aspiration. It's like our aspiration as Buddhists is to become a Buddha. You know, this is a huge aspiration, and we're not going to be doing it in a week. So the reason I really like these motivations is that anything that you do is included, that, you know, in the motivation. So we try from where we are, you know. We try from where we are. We decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to recycle better, I'm only going to eat meat once a month, and I'm going to get it from it. So, you know, you can try. It's wonderful. It's wonderful because there's so much that we can do, you know, on a very practical basis. Yeah. In fact, there's a wonderful book called by the Karmapa called "The Heart Is Noble," and it's a discussion with university students about how to live a more ethical, kinder way on the planet. Yeah. Okay. Well. Please stay for a cup of tea. I hope there's enough cake. Thank you very much for coming. Wednesday night there's Tara meditation if that interests you, and I'll be here next Monday and next Wednesday. Thank you.